1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5 says, "Stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time, so that ye may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." In the previous video, I talked about verses 3 and 4. The focus of those verses is on the husband's obligation to satisfy the sexual desires of his wife. The same command is given to the wife. She too is obligated under God to satisfy the sexual desires of her husband. And then in verse 5, we have this command, stop depriving one another. Number 1, you should never deprive your spouse of the sexual obligations God has placed on you. The word deprived or defraud in the King James Version means to withhold or avoid using deceit or dishonesty. It's withholding sex from your husband or wife for selfish and or dishonest reasons. Avoiding sex can become a way of getting back at your spouse, getting even for something he or she did or didn't do. He hurt me. She hurt me. I'm not going to have sex with him or her. Sex is used to punish the other person. Sex is used to manipulate the other person. For example, I'm too tired, or I have a headache, or I have a busy day tomorrow, or I have to finish checking my emails, when the truth is your spouse doesn't want to have sex. The reason he or she is mad about something, and so they use the excuse, I have a headache, and that's what it is, an excuse. They're not being honest. And of course, that's sinful. Now, it's possible your spouse is not being manipulative. He or she really does have a headache. For example, a man expresses his desire for sex. His wife says she has had a stressful day and she's really tired. She's being honest. That's good. What should she do? Well, she should be willing to please God by pleasing her husband. In other words, put his desires ahead of hers. What should the husband do? Well, he should put her desire ahead of his own. He needs to exercise self-control over his sexual desire. He needs to change his focus from himself to his wife. He needs to show love and understanding. Tell her it's okay, and he hopes she sleeps well and feels better tomorrow. But wait a minute. She's willing to put him first and satisfy his sexual desire. On the other hand, he's willing to put her first and honor her desire not to have sex. What do they do in that situation? Answer: they should not have sex. He shows her love and understanding, and she receives his love and understanding. Sadly, some husbands or wives insist on their spouse satisfying them. They sinfully focus on themselves. For example, the husband demands sex from his wife. He's behaving selfishly, sinfully. What should she do? The righteous response, in contrast to his unrighteous demand, is for her to focus on him, satisfy his desire. Number 2, husbands and their wife should only abstain from sexual relations if both agree. Paul commands couples, stop depriving one another except by agreement. Both husband and wife must agree to abstain from having sex. This is not referring to when you have sex, but when not to have sex. Both husband and wife should always be willing to focus on their spouse by satisfying their sexual desire. This is not talking about when to have sex, but when not to have sex. Verse 5 says, stop depriving one another, except by agreement for a time. The command is for a specific time. It's not open to a husband or wife's personal preference as to when they will resume satisfying their spouse. None of this, will get back to it eventually. It's not going to be, or rather, it's not to go on indefinitely. Both agree to a specific time. There must be a reason or purpose to abstain. Paul gives an example and says prayer. However, it's not limited to prayer. You could agree to abstain because your wife is on her period. Your husband is recovering from illness or surgery. Your husband says he has to work a double shift for the next 3 days. He's going to be exhausted, and when he comes home, he's going to be too tired. Your in-laws or your brother and his wife from out of town are all coming for a visit. There's a lot of reasons you agree to abstain. However, when the predetermined time is over, Paul says that you must resume sexual activity. Verse 5 says, come together again. Why? Why is coming together again so important? Well, Paul tells us, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So, how often should couples have sex? The answer is often enough to keep your husband or wife satisfied. It is to be frequent enough to avoid temptation. You see, Satan uses unsatisfied sexual desires to tempt husbands and wives to sin. To unbiblically abstain from sex inflames a person's desires. That does not justify their sin. My point is, it makes self-control more difficult. It makes sinning easier. Regularly, joyfully, and enthusiastically satisfying the sexual desire of one spouse will go a long way in preventing temptation and sin. A lot of arguments it'll also prevent. A lot of conflict, many of which are about sex, would be solved if husbands and wives were honest and used biblical principles in their relationship. Help my channel by selecting like and follow. Thank you for watching.